A college football preview here for Oklahoma State. The Cowboys are coming off of a rough one last year. They have a ton of transfers coming in. This has got to be a rebound year for the Pokes. Let's talk about their star players, few storylines, losses and additions to the roster, and then, of course, the record prediction. So for starters, the stars on this roster, to be honest, there's not too many that I can mention that I would be confident in saying that they're going to be extremely involved in the offense, but there are two. On offense, Freddie Brock transfers in from Georgia State. Last year, had 800 yards rushing. He has had 2,500 total scrimmage yards throughout his career. I think he'll be an impact guy after Oklahoma State loses one of the best running backs in their history, and I'm putting him in the conversation. Maybe not the conversation, but pretty close to a guy like Barry Sanders. Of course, there is a long difference between him and Ollie Gordon. That's who I'm talking about. But on offense, Freddie Brock is going to be the guy that gets to tote the rock the majority of the year. I don't know how well this passing game is going to perform, so we shall see what happens with that. But in the run game, Freddie Brock is your guy. On defense, Kyron Duhan, true freshman last year, had 7 sacks with UTEP. I think he's going to have to be one of the big pass rushing stars for this team if Oklahoma State wants to compete in the Big 12 that's extremely pass happy. So Kyron Duhan's going to have to put some pressure on opposing quarterbacks if the Pokes want to be relevant this upcoming year. Now, the first storyline that I want to talk about, speaking of relevancy, last year was the worst Oklahoma State team under Mike Gundy. He comes off, like I said, his worst performance record-wise in his career at Oklahoma State. They finished 3-9. They lost 9 in a row to finish off the season. The wheels fell off, and now 41 new transfers are coming in. It's time to establish a new culture, a new locker room, and new consistency. That is probably the biggest factor in winning these days, culture and consistency. The Oklahoma State Cowboys lack both of those things. Mike Gundy is going to have to get that under wraps. With that being said, let's talk about the lack of consistency with the losses and additions for this team. The Oklahoma State Cowboys lost Ollie Gordon. Like I said, one of the best running backs in history. He had, I think, 5,000 total scrimmage yards in his career. He accounted for almost 50% of Oklahoma State offense in the last 2 seasons, but last year he kind of fell off due to the offensive line not performing well at all, but I'll get that into a little bit. Nick Martin, the team's leading tackler over the last 2 years, only played, I believe, 5 games last year, missed 7 with an injury, 187 tackles, though, in about 17 games over the last 2 years. He will be duly missed on this defense. And then the rest of these guys get into the portal. Dijon, I believe, Stribling, wide receiver, transfers to Ole Miss. He was the leading receiver last year with 800 yards. That is going to be a guy that is 100%, like I said, duly missed due to the fact that Oklahoma State passing attack was abysmal last season. And I don't think it's going to be getting any better now that somebody like Stribling ends up leaving to go to Ole Miss. Last but not least, I want to talk about Kendall Daniels. He's an edge rusher that goes to Oklahoma. He was the team's leading sack leader, as well as the second guy in tackles. So that is alarming. You're losing somebody that not only is pretty much one of the big leaders on your defense, but also one of the main production guys on the defense. That is a major loss there for Oklahoma State. Now, who are some of the guys that they brought in? I already mentioned 2 of them. Freddie Brock, running back. Like I said, he's going to be toting the rock for Oklahoma State. He's going to be the starter. Next, I want to talk about Kyron Duhan, the true freshman from last year. He comes from UTEP. Like I already said, he is going to be a guy that has to perform immediately for Oklahoma State to continue to try to stay relevant in the Big 12. And then last, but certainly not least, I believe you pronounce his first name Terrell, or it might be Terrell. His last name Davis, of course. Terrell Davis comes from Central Oklahoma. Now, I'm talking about a gem here, but the stats that this guy put up last year were nuts. I haven't got to see him play at all, obviously. It's really hard to find tape from Central Oklahoma, but 1,600 yards and 15 touchdowns for Central Oklahoma last year. maybe this guy comes in and he's like one of the best receivers in the Big 12. I doubt that very seriously, but with the statistics like that, I mean, that's somebody that you want to mention when you talk about guys that are coming onto this roster. There's also 38 other transfers coming in, as well as tons of recruits. This is a brand new Oklahoma State roster. We'll have to see how it goes. But now I want to talk about my second storyline, the offensive line concerns. Now, I have talked about and praised Ollie Gordon here in this video. I think he's one of the best running backs from last season, certainly 2 seasons ago. I mean, everybody was talking about him in the run-up to last year because his sophomore season with Oklahoma State was off the charts good. I believe he had 1,600 or 1,700 rushing yards, a few hundred receiving yards, tons of touchdowns. You saw him in the Big 12 championship game. He kind of got shut down early on, but everybody thought he was going to have an explosive year last year. But Oklahoma State was just 89th in yards per rush and 124th in rushes per game. The second stat to me speaks louder than the first because with a guy like Ollie Gordon, you want to give him the ball as much as humanly possible unless you have zero confidence in your offensive line. And to me, that's exactly what I thought Oklahoma State showed last year by only giving him the ball. Well, they gave him the ball very seldom. And that's alarming to me. That screams that the offensive line was not there to do its job. They might have just been there to stand like statues. Now, with that being said, the entire offensive line starting projected from ourlads.com is going to be brand spanking new. Now, of course, I talked about consistency, an offensive line that's never technically played together. That brings up some consistency issues, but certainly Oklahoma State is going to look to have a better statistical season than last year on the ground. That's why they bring in those guys. You know, you don't bring in transfers for nothing. The only reason you bring in transfers is to make your team better. And if Oklahoma State has to reload the entire offensive line, that should scream volumes as to what they thought about the offensive line from last season. Now, moving on into the third storyline before we get into our record prediction, the number one factor in Oklahoma State losing 9 games in a row, might I add, was the turnovers, specifically the turnovers from their quarterback, Alan Bowman. 26 interceptions in the last 2 years. Last season, Oklahoma State was 120th and 128th in turnover margin and giveaways per game. Major problem. I will tell you right now, if you were in maybe even the bottom third of college football, FBS college football that is, in turnover margin, you're not going to have a winning record. And if you're near the bottom, well, my goodness gracious, you're going to lose 9 games in a row. That's exactly what happened to Oklahoma State. So they're really going to have to cut down on the turnovers if they want to have a better season. Will they do it? It's to be determined. I don't necessarily know for certain or not, but what I do know is that's going to be a focus of this team, as it is almost every college football team. The emphasis in the offseason and even during the year is stop turning the ball over. That is the death sentence for trying to win a game. So those are my 3 storylines that I want to talk about. It's a rebuild for Mike Gundy after his worst season. The offensive line is being completely redone, and Oklahoma State must cut down the turnovers. So now let's get into our X Factor game and record prediction. To me, the X Factor game is going to be game number 6 of the year. Oklahoma State is hosting Houston. Now, this Cougars team is not one to write home about. They're not that good of a team, in my opinion. They're certainly not going to be contending for the Big 12 championship. But Oklahoma State might lose that game, and that's something that I view as shocking because a game like that used to be very routine for Mike Gundy. That was it wasn't a business trip because they're staying at home, but you understand the concept. Oklahoma State is supposed to beat teams like Houston and Cincinnati. By God, they are one of the elder statesmen of the Big 12. And to me, they're on track to lose quite a few games this year. So now let's hop right into a game-by-game record prediction. Week number 1, UT Martin. Tennessee Martin is not a game where I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe Oklahoma State can lose that one. They're an FCS opponent. They should take care of business there. It might be closer than games in the past, but with that being said, I will give Oklahoma State the win there, but then they go and travel to Oregon, probably the toughest game of the year. Oregon's talent is just far surpassed Oklahoma State's. I will 1,000% give Oregon the win there. So 1-1 now, hosting Tulsa. Once again, not like an automatic W, but a game that Oklahoma State should win. So now 2-1, moving into hosting Baylor. A lot of people are counting Baylor out early. I think Sawyer, their quarterback, is going to have a phenomenal season. Dave Aranda is a great coach. I don't care what the naysayers say. I believe in Baylor. I do not believe in Oklahoma State, so that is a loss. So now 2-2, and it just kind of gets ugly from here. At Arizona, I like Noah Fafita a lot, even without Tet McMillan. I don't really like anything else that Oklahoma State has to offer to compete with that. It's on the road. You're moving back west. I don't like that spot for Oklahoma State. That's a loss. Hosting Houston, the X Factor game. I will still give Oklahoma State the benefit of the doubt. Houston, like I said, is a team that is not one that is going to compete for the Big 12 championship. As a matter of fact, they're going to be struggling to make a bowl game, as does Oklahoma State. I will give them the home field advantage. Mike Gundy can pull that one out and win that game. But then Cincinnati, here's my real record prediction here. Houston and Cincinnati, I think Oklahoma State splits 1-1 of them. Could they lose to Houston and then beat Cincinnati? Absolutely. And vice versa? 100%. So I think Cincinnati's a loss. I think Houston's a victory. So now let's see here, 3-4 heading into 2 back-to-back tough road games at Texas Tech and at Kansas. Neither of those games, to me, are going to be winnable. Both of those teams, whether you like Kansas or not, I think that they are a Big 12 championship contender. I will give Oklahoma State the loss in both of those games. It's really tough to win on the road, especially in a Power 4 conference like the Big 12. Then closing out the season, hosting Kansas State, Avery Johnson might use this as his Heisman game. And if Oklahoma State fans or teammates or coaches are watching this, mark this as bulletin board material. Avery Johnson is going to come in and pop off on Oklahoma State here. I will give them the loss. Moving into at UCF, this is yet another game that Mike Gundy would win routinely. Even though it's on the road, UCF is pretty much in shambles. Their head coach leaves to go be the offensive coordinator at Florida State. Their quarterback, I believe, is gone. Their running back duo is gone. I am not certain that this UCF team is ready to compete for just about anything, but I will give them the victory here based off of home field advantage. Oklahoma State can 1,000% win this game, but I have to see it to believe it. And then last but certainly not least, Iowa State coming in to Oklahoma State's home field. Even though it's at home, Iowa State has Rocco Beck. They have several impact transfers. They're not going to be the Big 12 championship contenders that they were last year without Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, but I still do have faith that they will be a more than competent and competitive team, and I think they can come into Oklahoma and win, or Oklahoma State, and win this game. So, to conclude, Oklahoma State repeats their failures from last year. They go 3-9. That's a brutal beat from Mike Gundy, who might have one foot out the door towards retirement by the end of this season. I don't know if he likes the NIL stuff. I don't think that he does. Oklahoma State, speaking of NIL, is not the NIL capital of the world. It's hard to get transfers in that will make impacts in a Power 4 conference like the Big 12. So that's why I have them at 3-9. Let me know what you think of the Poke season in the comments. Will they do better than 3-9? It's very possible, but that's where I have them sitting right now. So after all that, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.